Greetings, and welcome to our executive summary. We're Team 10, and I'm Jay. All semester long, we have strived to answer the question, should Waffle House branch out to the United Arab Emirates? We have written extensively on the subject, but today we're going to summarize our findings. First, Luke is going to give a brief overview of Waffle House, and then Savannah is going to give a brief background on the UAE. After that, we'll be covering our findings with topics like the political and cultural environment, doing business, market entry, and strategic planning. However, we would be amiss to not discuss the impact of COVID-19 on global expansion. So, Sean will talk a bit about that near the end. Then finally, we will recommend our answer for that very question, if Waffle House should expand to the UAE. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy our presentation. Let's start off with Luke and Waffle House.
Hey, my name's Luke Barrett. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Waffle House. As Americans living in the southeastern part of the country, we are very familiar with Waffle House and its brand. Waffle House was founded in 1955 in Atlanta, Georgia area and is known for its affordable breakfast and 24-hour service. They began franchising in the 1960s and have since used franchising to grow over 2,000 locations in 25 states. Majority of these 2,000 locations are in the southeastern part of the United States, and currently Waffle House has 0 international locations. Waffle House also uses a special lingo in ordering food. The smothered, covered lingo is unique to it. Smothered means sauteed in onions, covered means melted with cheese, chunked means topped with bits of ham, and it goes on for a variety of toppings you can add. This unique lingo might be challenging, or it might be a huge hit internationally. This will be something that Waffle House will need to figure out when expanding international markets such as the UAE, which Savannah will now be discussing. Thanks.
My name is Savannah, and I'm going to give you a little background of the UAE. The UAE is a country made up of 7 emirates, each with an absolute monarch, who together elect the presidential monarch. Out of the 7 emirates, we primarily focused on Abu Dhabi and Dubai for Waffle House to expand to because those are the 2 wealthiest emirates that benefit the most from their oil industry. The UAE has also taken steps to develop its political system to meet the needs of the country's socioeconomic progress, so they are prepared for global development. They have a mixed free market economy based on oil and gas production, with some sectors privately owned and some government owned. Their population is expected to continue climbing and is currently in the 95th percentile. Most of the population is urban, 90% of people living in cities, and the male population clearly dominates the female population. They are a collectivistic society, which means they value the needs of society as a whole more than individual freedoms. They value dependability and generosity. Their political structure is also closely related to a dictatorship with very strict laws that follow Sharia law, strict punishments such as lashing, and they punish those who speak out for democratic reform. The government heavily restricts freedom of speech, press, and censors all news criticizing the royal family or government. Even though the government is very restrictive with harsh punishments, this means they have a more stable government with little political unrest. The country is flourishing under the current government, and they have been getting more stable over the years. In Dubai and Abu Dhabi, people make a higher salary than in other Emirates, and there are many luxuries like fancy hotels and malls, and everyone there really enjoys well-known and expensive fashion brands. So this is something Waffle House will need to consider because the US, they are known for comfort family foods, and the UAE, they may need to change their business model based on their target audience. This is just a very brief summary of the UAE, so keep watching if you want to learn more about Waffle House expanding to this great but very interesting country.
Hi all, I'm Jay. Now that we know a bit about the company and country from Luke and Savannah, let's get into all that entails expanding Waffle House into the UAE. I'll start by summarizing the political and cultural environment. We decided on the UAE because of the large American expatriate population located there. Although the economy in the UAE is set to downturn because of COVID-19, the central bank has plans that assist in ways that seem promising. The political structure of the 7 emirates that make up the UAE is one of a monarchy, with dictatorship trends, plus strong religious tones. While that might be intimidating, they also have an incredibly stable government, which is good for business. Furthermore, there are not many political risks, as it is a wealthy, expat-filled, growing country. The risk comes from the fact that LLCs, like Waffle House, must be majority owned by a UAE national. This causes limited control. Otherwise, the political climate is fairly stable. As for bribery and corruption, the UAE government has increased laws to control and diminish it, which is good for Waffle House. One of the biggest difficulties, though, will be the cultural communication differences. The UAE and USA differ greatly in context, nonverbal, and status importance. However, small steps can be taken to greatly reduce this friction, like effort and patience. Finally, when consulting Hofstede's model, we know that UAE has higher power distance and uncertainty avoidance than USA does, which should be taken into account when doing business. Speaking of doing business, we'll cover that next with Savannah.
Thanks, Jay. So as you mentioned, I will discuss what doing business in the UAE will consist of. So first, we covered the demographics, and we found that they have a population of almost 10 million people, with their populations continuing to climb and expected to peak at 10.71 million in 2033. Since their fertility rate has dropped, their government has adopted policies to help young married people financially to encourage childbearing. The demographic in Abu Dhabi and Dubai consists of rich expatriates who are drawn to lavish lifestyles. Their population is extremely diverse, with only 10% of the population as UAE nationals and the rest as expatriates. Their population pyramid is also dominated by males, with the majority of the population falling between 18 and 50-year-olds, which is a good target range for Waffle House. The World Inequality Database reports that their per capita income levels are $49,935 USD, which is comparatively high due to their oil mining and refining. This contributes to higher level incomes, with 63% of the population earning in the top 10% of the average income, which is vastly different than in the US. Their high concentration of wealth is due to their region's successful oil industry that other countries like the US depend on. Their largest export is petroleum, which many other countries need, and that creates high demand. The high demand means they import a lot of other goods like machinery, food, and textile-related products so they can focus on petroleum products. The UAE focuses more on extraction of oil and sends it to other countries to be refined. When looking at the business environment, we can see that the UAE is open and free, with a very vibrant economy focused on trade. It is known for being easy to conduct business with because of aspects like reduced fees for business incorporation, easier building permits, improved minority investor protection, and increased ease of trade across borders. Finally, before expanding, Waffle House would need to take their exchange rates into account. Their consumer prices decreased 2.14% year-on-year in 2020, following a 2.3% fall in the prior month and marking the 19th straight month of deflation. Currently, the exchange rate for the UAE to the USD is 1.27, meaning for every UAE dirham, you get 27 cents in USD. This exchange rate has stayed on the same trend for years without any sign of change, which is good news for Waffle House. That's all I have for doing business, so let's go to Luke for Waffle House's market entry strategy.
Now we're going to discuss some possible market entry strategies. It's worth noting the United Arab Emirates is known for their involvement in the oil industry. The GDP in 2020 went to negative 3.49% amid the pandemic, but it is projected that it's going to grow to positive 3.49% as we come out of the pandemic. Waffle House is currently a domestic company, and therefore they have never expanded internationally. They should consider franchising just as they've done in the United States. Waffle House costs nearly $1 million to start a franchise in the United States, and we expect that it could potentially be more expensive in country. But this should not deter people, because the United Arab Emirates are a very wealthy country thanks to the oil industry. Of the 4 entry model options, we believe that localization is the best option. It will allow Waffle House to cater their menu and make changes necessary that will be appealing to the customers in that area. Competitors such as McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken have also used similar entry methods and become wildly successful. The main competitors that I believe that Waffle House will be competing with is IHOP, Starbucks, and McDonald's. These restaurants are well known in American markets, but also internationally. Differentiation will also be important. Waffle House is unique because they utilize an open grill layout and decor of the traditional American diner that can be found very few other places, but they're also still very affordable. This will appeal to guests looking for an American experience or tourists or expatriates that are looking for a taste of home. The 24/7 service is also very appealing in a busy, changing world that we live in. Thank you for your time, and on the next slide we will hear from Sean, who's going to discuss some points regarding strategic planning and the effects of COVID-19. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sean, and I will be going over the strategic planning for Waffle House, how COVID is impacting expansion into new countries, and recommendations for Waffle House as they look into the future of expansion. Waffle House's strategic planning consists of 3 different strategies. The first is sales and marketing, which is a plan to reach, engage, and gain new consumers and make a profit. The next strategy is the human resource strategy, which is the retention of employees, relocating current employees, and hiring new employees. And these are just some of the concepts that go into the HR strategy. And the last strategy is supply chain strategy, which basically sets up a plan to get supplies from one location to the next as easily and as cheap as possible. The coronavirus has had a remarkable impact on the world as a whole, shutting down large gatherings and implementing travel bans. This makes it extremely difficult for businesses to expand to new countries, especially one like Waffle House where you have to sit and eat somewhat close to one another. Our recommendation for Waffle House to expand to the UAE would be to start by routinely cleaning and disinfecting surfaces that you think somebody has touched or might have come in contact with. Also, we suggest holding off on this expansion into new territories until the coronavirus pandemic is a thing of the past. To conclude our executive summary about opening a Waffle House restaurant in the UAE, we see that although Waffle House would be a great fit for the UAE's busy economy, they should probably wait before expanding into this new area. With the uncertainty of the markets and the fact that there is still no vaccine for the coronavirus, if Waffle House were to open a restaurant there today, it would have a very difficult time staying open unless Waffle House followed the safety guidelines implemented by the country, and if they routinely clean their surfaces. Even if they did that, they would still have a hard time staying open. These are only a few safety measures that Waffle House could take in order to continue operating during these troubling times. We hope you enjoyed our project, and we hope that everyone stays safe. Thank you.